Well, hi everyone, Corey Barker here, and welcome back once again to Master Effects Training. Now, I'm just back from Photoshop World last week, had a fantastic time, and really great to see everyone, had a great time teaching the classes, and if you were there, really hope you enjoyed it, and perhaps we'll see you next time. Now, in this tutorial, I wanted to show you one of the graphics I created. Actually, it was the day I left for Photoshop World, and I got really excited about the event, so I created this graphic in 3D. And if you were at my classes, I showed you this, or if you followed on any of my social channels, you probably saw this graphic as well. So I wanted to go ahead and show you how I put this together and how you can play around with this type of effect. So we're going to start with a new document. Now, I've gone ahead, for the sake of time, put my text together that I'm going to use this for. And I've just gone ahead and just reworked the Master Effects Training type here. And want to go ahead and add the framing element to this. So I'm going to go into, actually I'm going to go in here in my layers panel. Let's pull the layers panel out first. I'm going to turn off the background layer. And I'm going to go ahead and fill the text with black. So with the text layer selected, press D to make sure your colors are the default. And I'm going to press Option Delete and fill the text with black. And then we're going to go into the toolbar here, into the shape tools, and just go ahead and choose the rectangle. Now up here in the options bar, we're going to go up here and make sure we have the fill color set to none. And then the stroke, go ahead and set that to black as well. And I was going to go in my document here and undo that. I'm going to hold down the Shift key so I get a perfect square. I'm just going to draw a box around my text here. You can see that the stroke width is not quite what I want here. So let's go back up into the options bar. And let's just go ahead and change that. Let's go to about 20. You know what? Maybe I want to go a little bit thicker. Let's do 25. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and center this. Just do a Command A to select all. Select my Move tool, and then just go ahead and do a vertical and horizontal center alignment there. There we go. So now if you'll look in my layers panel, I have two layers. One has the framing element and the other one has the text itself, both filled with black. Because as I said, when you're creating an element that's going to have a metallic surface to it, reflecting, you need to start with a solid black base color. Okay, so let's go ahead and convert these to 3D. So I'm going to start with the framing element here, or the framing shape. So I'm going to select that, go to the 3D menu, and go down here and choose New 3D Extrusion from Selected Path. Now it's going to create the extrusion based on the stroke shape, as you can see right here. And as usual, the extrusion depth is a little deeper than I want it to be. So let's go and open up our 3D and Properties panel. I've already got my 3D panel here, so I just need my Properties panel. There it is. And with the current view selected, as usual, I'm just going to rotate my angle here and see how deep it is. And that's just, it's created this box, really. And I just need it to be a very thin frame. So you just select the rectangle element here in the 3D panel. Go over to your Properties panel, and let's just dial down the extrusion depth. And we're going to bring it down pretty far. In fact, I'm going to do it like 50, I think. There, it looks good. And let's go ahead and default camera so it brings it back to the front view. Now, notice also there is that ground plane shadow, which I do not need. So let's go ahead and select Environment. Jump over to the Properties panel and go to the ground plane settings, and let's dial that down to 0. All right. Now let's go ahead and convert the text. So I'm going to select the text layer, and let's go to the 3D menu, New 3D Extrusion from Selected Layer. Going to do the exact same thing with the extrusion. If we just grab Current View and rotate it, obviously too deep, so let's go ahead and bring that back down. In fact, let's make it the same depth as the framing element we did. And let's go ahead and hit default camera, bring that back to the front view there. And as also, let's go and dial down that ground plane shadow. There we go, right there. All right, so now we have both elements converted to 3D, but now we want to combine them so that they're both on the same 3D layer. So go ahead and just select the top element, or the framing element in this case, which is right above the text layer, and you're just going to simply press Command or Control E, or you can go ahead and select both layers and go to the 3D menu here and simply choose Merge 3D Layers, which is the second item from the top here. Now it's going to go and combine them together, and as usual, it merges them into a single 3D layer, but they are still separate here in the 3D panel. Notice you have the text object and, of course, the rectangular object. So we can edit them separately. So before we go ahead and adjust the surface properties on our 3D objects here, let's go ahead and get the splash element and bring it over as well. Now, the splash element is actually from Adobe Stock, and I've provided the link to it. I've also provided you a practice version of it to play around with and practice this technique. What you do is if you go and download it from Adobe Stock and download it to your desktop, you've got a folder that contains a few files here. And what you want is the OBJ file right here. So splash 10 OBJ. And that I'm going to take it and just drag it down and open it right directly into Photoshop. And go ahead and leave it that size and go ahead and click OK. Now, depending on the complexity of a 3D model, as I've said before, sometimes this process may take a few seconds because it's processing a lot of information the more complex the 3D model is. And once it opens up, we'll go ahead and modify it. Now, when I demoed this at Photoshop World, I was talking about when you bring in an object like this from Adobe Stock, there are some things you have to tweak and adjust to make it work. Because these 3D models are built and optimized for Project Felix, but they do also work here inside Photoshop. But you got to tweak a few things with it and just make a few adjustments. So the first thing being, if I grab my current view here and rotate around, the obvious thing is the ground plane shadow. But I'm going to adjust those things in just a moment. Let's go ahead and take it and bring it on over into our working document here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the layer itself and hold down the Shift key and just drag and drop it over. And it's going to go ahead and just drop it right there in the center. There we go. Let's go ahead and minimize that. Now, notice when I brought it over, it's still on its own 3D layer. And we're going to merge these in just a moment, but let's adjust some things on the splash layer itself. So again, I'm going to grab current view and rotate around here. Now, the first thing is that ground plane shadow. Let's, of course, go in here and adjust that in the environment settings. Go down here to ground plane settings, and let's just, again, set that to 0. Now, one of the common things you'll notice when you bring a 3D object from Adobe Stock into Photoshop is that you're going to see that the highlights are really blown out. The specular highlights are really just completely blown out. And the reason for that is when you go into your 3D panel and select the main Splash 10 object here, you'll notice that there is a material layer just beneath it. So Splash 10 material. When you select that and jump over here into the properties panel, you're going to see all the surface properties that we can adjust, like shine and reflection. But up here at the top, you'll see a setting for specular. And the color right now for specular is set to white. And you can think of this as kind of like a layer mask. The brighter the specular color, the much brighter the specular highlight is. When you dial that color down, it actually diminishes how bright it is. If I go in here and click on that swatch, and you'll notice it's at the very top, pure white. If I take that color and drag it down to a darker gray, the specular highlights are going to get a little bit darker and darker. So that you can see that goes all the way down there. And I want to get rid of the highlights or the specular highlights altogether. I just want to dial it down so it's not blowing out detail. And again, you can always adjust this later on. So for now, that's looking okay. Now I want to change the color of the base object itself, or the base splash element itself. And to do that, we'll simply go to the diffuse property here in that properties panel. Go into the little menu here and choose edit texture. Now you're going to see right inside this document, you're going to see this wireframe here. And this is just simply an overlay. Basically, think of the splash surfaces laid out flat. And that's what you're looking at here. This is just a visual aid. And this is designed to help you better place logo elements and things like that on 3D objects. But since this is an organic splash element, we're not going to be placing anything particular. All we're going to do here is simply fill this layer with black. So I'm going to Option Delete since black is my foreground color. Close it and save the changes. So there it is. So this is how it starts to take on that kind of oil look, that oil splash look that you saw in the original. So grab my current view and rotate it around here, and I can see that the surface looks right, but or rather the color looks right, but the reflections and such are not quite there yet. I need it to be a little bit shinier and look more like liquid. So to do that, Let's go back into that material file, and we're going to go down here to the shine and reflection properties, and let's dial these up for shine and reflection. Don't want to dial them up quite as much. Let's actually put the shine somewhere around 70 and then the reflection around 50. And by doing that, you're seeing these tiny specular highlights. And what these are is the reflection of the default IBL, or image-based light. So what we need to do is adjust that. So go into your environment property. This is where we adjusted that ground plane shadow. And right up at the top, you'll see the IBL right here. And there's the default IBL, which is simply a gray background with a bunch of little white dots. We're going to create a new one rather. So go into the little pop-up menu here and choose New Texture. And we're going to set the width and height to 1000. Just make it a square document here. And when it's the new document file is actually set to fill with white, and by doing that, it completely blows out the detail because it's completely illuminating it with 100% white light, as you can see indicated right here in the thumbnail. So go back into that document, or go back into this menu rather, and choose Edit Texture. I'm going to go ahead and invert this image. Right now it's white. If I press Command or Control I, inverts it, makes it black. I'm just going to go ahead and do my typical abstract oval selection here. So let's grab the elliptical marquee tool, drag out an oval selection here. And in the layers panel, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer. Get my gradient tool here. Up here in the options bar, let's go ahead and choose a foreground to transparent gradient. I also have the radial gradient selected. That is fine. And then finally, I'm going to press X to bring white as my foreground color here. And I'm just going to start on the outside of the selection and just drag it in like that and create a little bit of a fade. And that's all I'm going to do. So let's close that, save the changes. And now we're going to see a much more realistic reflection of the light on the surface of the liquid here. Now it looks more like oil with a very realistic reflection on it. So that looks really good. All right. So the oil splash is done for the moment. So I'm actually going to turn that layer off, and let's go back to the text layer. And let's process the surface on this one before we go ahead and merge these elements together. So what I'm going to do, go into your 3D panel here, and let's go and first select the text object. And select the main object here in the 3D panel, which is Master Effects Training, text object. Then go to the Properties panel. Nope, didn't want to turn that off. Go over to the Properties panel and go to the Cap settings, which is just the third tab here at the top. And then go down to the Inflate properties here toward the bottom and go to the Strength setting. And we're just going to set that to 1. And that's just going to slightly bulge out the front face of the text here. All right. Now, once we have that, I'm going to go back to that rectangle setting, or the rectangle object here in the 3D panel. And let's just twirl this down and reveal the various surfaces. Just below rectangle 1, you're going to see settings for front inflation, front bevel, and extrusion. Hold down the Shift key and select all 3 of these. And then go jump over to the Properties panel here, and you're going to take the Shine setting and dial that all the way up to 100. And then take the Reflection, dial that to 100 as well. Now, this obviously affects all 3 surfaces that we can see, the front, sides. Now, the bevel's included, and that's only because we added the Shift key to select all these, but we don't have a bevel on this, so you don't really see it anyway. But it's not going to affect anything as far as the way it looks. Let's do the same thing to the text layer. Go ahead and twirl that down. Let's select all those surfaces. Once again, take the Shine and Reflection to 100%. And again, what you're seeing is that default IBL on this particular layer. In fact, if I go and select the environment, and then use my 3D Orbit tool, move it around, you can see how the light behaves on the surface of the text there. But we're going to be changing this surface to get that kind of gold metallic look. And to do that, we're actually going to use an environment map. And it's different from an IBL. An IBL affects the entire area. Anything that's inside the 3D layer will be affected by the IBL. But I want a very specific metallic look on the text, and then I want to blend it with the oil, the splash element. So go into the text. Let's go ahead and apply it to the text first. So go into that text element here, and I'm going to go once again select all 3 layers, and we're going to go down here to the environment property here in the surface properties, or the materials panel, and go to the menu here and choose load texture. Now you can use any image you like that has an abstract chrome element to it or something like that, and I'm going to use this one here. This is the one I use often. It's got variations of lines and chrome elements and various tones and such. It really helps give that metallic look. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that and hit open. And that's going to go ahead and apply it to the text there. So now if I grab current view and move my camera around, you can see it gives me that metallic look. It's reflecting that image on there. And you can see how the front face of the text is bulging out, and that increased surface area kind of bends the graphic on the front face of the text there. Looks really good. All right, so let's go ahead and hit default camera again. Let's go ahead and apply that same chrome element to the rectangle. So again, I'm going to select those 3 layers, go over here to the environment property, and instead of just reloading it as I did a moment ago, since we're already using that document, go ahead and just choose it in the menu here, Chrome 1. And it's going to go ahead and apply it on there. So now if I grab current view again, now you can see that that chrome effect is all over it now. But I want it to be gold, not a chrome element. So to get the gold look, go and select any of the surfaces that have the chrome element applied to it. In this case, I'm just going to select the front and face of the rectangle. Go to that environment property and go to the menu and simply choose Edit Texture. It's going to open up that chrome file that we just applied. And I'm just going to go and bring out my layers panel, create a new blank layer, and go ahead and give it a gold fill. In fact, I'm going to use this color mixture here, and you can see that this is the numbers that I'm using for this gold color. Go ahead and fill that empty layer with the color. Just press Option Delete or Alt Backspace if you're on Windows. Jump over here and set this to Overlay Blend Mode so that it mixes with the graphic below. But then select the chrome layer itself and then run a little bit of a blur on it. Let's go under Filter, go to Blur, and do a Gaussian blur. And about a 2 or 3 pixel blur will be fine. So let's do a 3 pixel blur here, and there we go. And then just close this and save the changes. And now we have our gold graphic element, and it looks really good. So if I move it around, you can see how it behaves around there. Now I can adjust the position of this chrome element on the surface of the text, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But for now, that's looking really, really good. So I'm going to go back to my splash element here, and you can see that the splash element's got the light and reflection, all that's looking really good. So I'm actually going to position the text and frame element above the oil splash layer. And just so you can see what's going on here, I'm going to turn off the background layer for the moment. So we've got our text and framing element on one layer, splash on another layer. We're going to do just like we did earlier and merge these together. In this case, I'm just going to simply press Command or Control E, which is the same keyboard shortcut for merging 2 regular layers, but now it's merging 2 3D layers. So it does know the difference and keeps them separate in the 3D panel. So there we go. Now, some objects may get larger or smaller when they're merged together. So you just got to go in here and adjust. I'm going to go in here and select both the rectangle and splash elements. And let's go ahead and scale those down. There we go. All right, about like that. And then now I can select that splash element and also move it around. And now you can see it's interacting with the original image here. So I'm actually going to scale this quite a bit here. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the background layer again so we can better see what's going on here. So I'm going to move the splash around, and you want to get it to where it's really kind of interacting with your graphic. You want to have some elements of it coming forward in front of the text and frame, but you don't want to lose, obviously, the readability of the graphic itself. Let me zoom out here, and you can really see what's going on. So there we go. I'm going to rotate this around. This is a really great practice for moving an object around using the widget. So you can just practice with positioning the element any way you want here. Oop. Just move that around, maybe pull it forward just a little bit here. Reselect the splash here. I think I gotta rotate it just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, let's want that splash element right in the front there. There we go. So it's just a matter of moving these elements around once you have the 3D elements all in place. So I'm going to put this right about there. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on the background layer, and that's looking really good. Now I'm going to go in here and adjust that IBL. So go and select Environment and just move this around. You'll see that the IBL is really only affecting the oil splash element here. It actually is shining on the gold element, but we're not seeing it, and that's because we've got the other environment property on the gold image right now. And so zoom it back in here. If I go ahead and start a render here, if I just go to the 3D menu and go ahead and do Render 3D Layer. Oh, not quite that one. There we go. Render 3D. And you can always start the render and cancel it, but you want to go ahead and start it because you can't see the reflections and other elements until you actually start the render. So there you can see that that's looking pretty good, and that's not bad. I like that. So now I'm just going to go in here into my layers panel, put a new blank layer above the background layer, but behind the graphic. I'm just going to add a couple of very simple gradients here. I'm going to set my foreground color to white. Just press D, then X. Go up here in the options bar, and you've got your gradients. Again, I'm going to go ahead and use the foreground to transparent, radial gradient, but I'm going to bring the opacity down quite a bit, probably around 30 or 40. And just add a couple of small highlighted elements in the background here, just so it'll kind of shape out the splash element so it doesn't get lost in the background too much. I'm going to go ahead and reselect my graphic layer. I'm just going to kind of reposition some things here. Adjust the scale a little bit. Don't forget that widget. Use the widget to, especially when you are scaling objects much bigger or much larger than you can see in the frame here. That widget's going to come in really handy for certain things here. So now I'm going to go grab my current view here because I want to kind of turn this around and see what's going on in the back here. We're getting pretty good element there. So again, I'm going to hit default camera. Oh, let me undo that. Just going to undo it and go back to my view here. Now the default camera I just adjusted went to the default camera of the splash layer, and you'll notice it was offset a little bit. So, show you a little trick. I'm going to adjust my splash here just a little bit here. And let's nudge it back. Again, I'm just using my 3D tools just to kind of reposition this. Oop. There we go. Okay. About something like that. So what you want to do is go to your current view, go to the properties panel here, and go to this view menu and choose save if you want to get this master view saved here. So I'm just going to call it main view 1. There we go. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and start the render in just a moment and finish it up. But there you can see how you can have some fun playing with these really complex abstract 3D elements from Adobe Stock and combine them with your own text and graphic elements to create something rather interesting. Now I want to show you one more thing before I check out here. Is when I started that render, I noticed the gold was reflecting and it looked really good. If you want to add a little bit more enhancement to the gold itself, go into that text layer. We'll do the text first. Go to the front inflation material here. So go ahead and select that. In the properties panel, you're going to see the specular highlight and other things like that. And you can, in fact, dial up that specular highlight. Remember, we dialed this down earlier, but if you increase that back up, you can actually adjust how bright the specular highlights are, and that will do something. Another trick is to go in here into the illumination property and just add a very, very dark gold to this. In fact, I'm going to dial this to a gold color. Let's just give it, very dark. If you go bright, you're just going to blow out detail. This just provides a little bit of illumination to give it a little bit more saturated look there. So hit OK there, and let's go ahead and start the render and see what we've got. And again, depending on the speed of your machine, may take a moment for the render to start. And you can cancel the render anytime by simply hitting escape once you get an idea of what's going on here. And I think that looks pretty good. So you can see now the specular highlights are even brighter, and the gold is even a little bit brighter because we added that subtle illumination layer to it. So that looks really good. Now, one last thing. That chrome layer that is applied to the text and the framing element, if you need to adjust the position, remember with the IBL, if you go and select environment and you grab the 3D rotate tool, you can actually adjust that lighting here. But what if you wanted to adjust the lighting without moving the object on the text? Because there's no way to adjust the environment using a widget like this. So to make that change, go and select the text layer, go to that environment property, and simply choose Edit UV Properties in the window, in the menu here. Here you can adjust the scale and the positioning of that texture. So notice as I use the scrubby slider, move this around. Notice how the texture is moving around in the letters here. So when you want to adjust that texture, depending on where you want to see the highlights and darker areas, you want to do that using these UV properties like this. So there you can make the adjustments. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the render and wrap this up. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. Again, if you were at Photoshop World, I hope you had a great time, and we're going to get back on track, getting some stuff done here at Master FX Training, and we'll see you next time. Take care.